Welcome to the Luxury Listing Specialist Podcast with Michael LaFido, where top luxury agents reveal their best practices, plus interviews with real estate industry influencers, thought leaders, and luxury marketing experts. You'll come away from each episode with new strategies and tactics to dominate high-end homes in any market. And now for the latest episode of Luxury Listing Specialist. Here's your host, luxury real estate expert, coach, and trainer, Michael LaFido.
Welcome back to another episode of the Luxury Listing Specialist Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LaFido. And remember to check out our previous episodes on iTunes or Stitcher, or you can go to luxurylistingpodcast.com, luxurylistingpodcast.com. Just let's go over a couple housekeeping items here. If you have any questions for me, or if you want to suggest a topic or you think somebody would be a great guest, go ahead and email me, michael@marketingluxurygroup.com, michael@marketingluxurygroup.com. Last but not least, if you're interested in our free luxury blueprint along with video checklist and 3-part video series, text the word Lux, L-U-X-E, to 72000. Again, text L-U-X-E to 72000. All right, let's get that out of the way. Let's get right into things. Welcome back to another episode. I'm, like I said, your host, Michael LaFido. This guest I'm really excited about having. As you know, we have top influencers. We have rock star luxury agents with independents, big brands, and we also have influencers and leaders of national franchises and powerful companies. And I'm excited to have Simon Chen today, who's the president and CEO of ERA. He's got a very impressive resume. And welcome, first off, Simon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you have a real estate agent background. You were the CEO of Realty One Group, which is in California. And tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you ended up now the president and CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the world.
Sure, thanks. So I actually started out my career in investment banking, ironically, in the primarily technology and medical space. So the short story there is that I was meant to be a doctor, and I disappointed my parents greatly by not becoming a doctor and ending up going into investment banking for the medical sector, which expanded to other technology stuff, as I'll call it. And, you know, when I was working within the investment bank, actually, I ended up wanting to get some operating experience, and so I joined a .com that we'd invested in out in California, and that was my ticket to get out to California. And so I worked there for quite a while doing IT consulting. So I like to say that my background really is in technology. The way I found my way to real estate is when the .com bubble expanded and everybody thought that they were going to make a lot of money, and then when that bubble burst and everybody found out they weren't going to make a lot of money, I was sort of licking my wounds, and I moved down to Los Angeles, and I said, you know what, the next company that I start is going to have assets that I can kick and touch and feel. And I'd been investing in real estate, while I was in investment banking as just sort of a passive investment stream. And so I started a real estate company because I, firmly believe in helping everyone fulfill the American dream of, buying real estate and viewing it as sort of the best investment they can have. And so that's where I've been for the last, 20 some odd years, is at that weird intersection between real estate and technology. So I've had roles like working in corporate development and strategy at Realtor.com, and then ultimately made my way over to Realty One Group and now to ERA. The thrust being always, how can we make the consumer experience in buying real estate better? I believe technology is a huge enabler to that, and being here at ERA, which is part of Realogy, is a great way to do that because obviously as the largest real estate company in the world, we have resources that I never could have dreamed of, running my own brokerage for 15 years.
Uh-huh. So the experience is really important. We've talked about this. We've had previous guests. They really talked about, improving the buyer experience, the seller experience. Here at the Luxury Listing Specialist, we do focus so much on the listing side of things, but the experience, whether it be entry level or luxury, is so important. You bring to the table a very lengthy experience with working with Chinese buyers. Talk to us a little bit about that, because today's show we're going to talk a little bit about the Chinese buyers and cyber currency and that sort of thing. So talk to us a little bit about your experience with Chinese buyers and even how you, as the president and CEO of ERA, how you without letting cats out of the bag, so to speak, but how do you target some of these foreign buyers?
Right. So, I wish I could say that it was brilliance or genius or anything like that made my own brokerage successful in servicing Chinese buyers. But it actually came from very humble, very simple beginnings, which is, usually how the best stories start, I guess. When I started that brokerage, I, being of Chinese American descent and speaking Mandarin Chinese, always felt like that was an underserved market, because I had friends and relatives coming over from Taiwan and China that obviously didn't speak English, and therefore I was helping them out, right? And if you are anybody, whether you are regardless of, I guess, price point, I should say, and you're speaking a foreign language when you come into the U.S., obviously you are at a distinct disadvantage in even looking at listings if you don't know how to speak English. And therefore, having somebody, in the U.S. that could actually help them through that process and spoke their language was a huge benefit. So that's number one. I don't, thank anybody other than my parents, basically, for teaching me Chinese, growing up and then being able to retain that skill. The second thing is, this was about 17 years ago, I guess, or so, when I started the company. I wish there were all these sophisticated technologies that we use nowadays here at ERA through our distinctive properties offering to help our, agents and our brokers basically service the international luxury theater. Back then, it was very simple. If you came to the U.S. from China or Taiwan and you wanted to read a Chinese language newspaper, there was really only one or two that you found. And so typically you hit the ground, you went to Chinatown, you bought this newspaper, and you read it. And so it was very simple for me. I just advertised in that newspaper for $38 a week. I still remember that. And just said, hey, I'm a Chinese-speaking former investment banker, real estate agent that would love to help you, look for an acquire and manage properties here in the U.S. And that set my phone ringing, And so it started very simply. I think it's evolved quite a bit since then, obviously, and a lot of that is the advent of technology. So now, whether it's Juai or other sites in China, for example, you can see inventory from all across the U.S. that has been translated for you. And that's one of the things that we at ERA do for our clients on distinctive properties. We syndicate that listing and have it translated into 55 different countries and about 120 international websites. So it's the Uber version of that $38 a week newspaper, but now it's actually going to them in their home country so that they can browse inventory and look at a lot of the listings, on their own time and at their own leisure.
Well, you brought up a couple things. So first off, translating to their native language, when these properties are syndicated is huge. You also talked a little bit about your distinctive properties division. I should have started with that, but obviously ERA, we've had different CEOs on, different luxury division leaders, and every brand kind of defines luxury different. Offline we were talking a little bit, and so your luxury division at ERA is known as distinctive properties.
That's right.
Talk to me a little bit about the properties themselves and how you define, or how does a property qualify to be a distinctive property?
Sure. So what is a little bit unique about distinctive properties for us at ERA is that it's not necessarily a specific price threshold, okay? So we're not saying, hey, it needs to be in the, 6 or 7 figures or whatever, much more, in order to qualify for that, because we believe that in any market there are quote-unquote luxury or distinctive properties in that market. And so depending on the market, that could be, if you're in San Francisco, a distinctive property could be in the, the tens of millions of dollars, or in downtown Manhattan or what have you, whereas if you're, in Montana, or Las Vegas or something, the price point could be substantially lower. And so it's important for us, because our brokers and agents service a wide spectrum of price ranges, that we don't necessarily focus on a specific dollar figure so much as, a proportion of the market. And so the way we look at it is, by and large, it's about the top 10% of the market, right?
Well, it's all relative, is what I hear you saying.
That's right.
And we define for our certification, luxury listing specialist, we define high-end homes as being 2 times whatever the average sale price is for that given market, and we define luxury homes as being 3 times whatever the average sale price is for that given market. So if the average sale price is $250, a high-end home, according to our certification, would be $500,000 and above, and luxury with that same $250 average sale price would be $750. So a lot of similarities, Simon, with ERA's definition, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's all relative.
You're exactly right. And so we certify either the property or the agent or both. So the agents have to go through a certification. There's an annual fee. But what it gets them is an expanded sort of toolbox, if you will, of marketing materials, collateral, and even a separate website. So the distinctive properties appear on our ERA Distinctive Properties website, and it has a really cool gadget, for example. I'm the tech guy, so I get excited about this sort of thing, where you can do virtual staging. So you can look at any property as you're browsing through and looking at the property, and let's say, hey, I like the house, but I wish it had different floors or different countertops or different paint or different cabinets or what have you. You can do those sorts of things. If you want to go in and, start to move around some of the furniture and do some of the virtual staging, et cetera, those sorts of things are available to you. And so, when you and I were talking offline, I think from our own personal experience, we've seen that when we show buyers or prospective buyers a property, that the vast majority of them, your number was 90%, and I don't doubt that at all. The vast majority of people, whether they're on the buy or the sell side, just don't have that artistic ability or vision to be able to imagine a property in any way other than the way it's currently presented, which is obviously why staging is so prevalent in the industry now and becoming increasingly prevalent. Right? Yeah. Because you really need to be able to present the property in its sort of highest and best state so that people can envision what it might be like to live there without having to redecorate it, for example.
You're absolutely right. We talk about how you position a home so that the majority of buyers can mentally, picture themselves moving in. And, whether it be a property that is very dated, whether it be a taste-specific home, the way you live in your home, Simon, the way I live in our home, my wife and I live in our home, is to our style, to our decorating. But when you go to sell a home, you want to use timeless classics, right? You don't want to be blah neutral, but it's safer to be a little blah than very risque, so to speak.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, because the likelihood that you're going to find somebody that is exactly like you is obviously, quite small. That's the whole point of all of us being unique. And therefore, making it as appealing to as broad a spectrum of people is the key to any sort of staging approach.
Yeah, really is. Great. The other thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is talk to me about the experience with Juwai.
Sure. So Juwai is one of those sites. There's a few that are on the other side of the Great Data Wall of China, as they call it, or the Great Firewall of China. So not a lot of sites are able to be sort of on the other side of the wall and allow Chinese nationals to be able to view the websites. And that is one of their great fortes. And so they have a U.S. presence, but agents can actually then, register to have their listings syndicated over to Juwai so that, folks in China can actually see them, because websites like ours or websites like, Realtor.com or what have you, you can't get to if you're in China.
Right. Okay. So it's that barrier getting on, like you said, the Great Wall, right? Getting on the other side of the wall so that your properties can be even viewed. There's even eyeball traffic.
That's right. Yeah. And that's one of those kinds of things where it's either happening or it's not, right? And the Chinese government obviously cracks down quite heavily in terms of what sites are viewable within China. And so Juwai is one of those that is, built out the presence, but also the permissions to be able to operate a site in China.
Mm-hmm. And languaging. You talked about having, websites, flyers, printable materials. Talk to me a little bit about have your agents, even when you're creating special feature sheets for actual showings or flyers and brochures, having different brochures and flyers in different languages based on, the likelihood of a potential buyer coming from, that language. For example, I'm based in Chicago, the melting pot. So we have a lot of different, speaking nationalities here, and having, different collaterals in various languages just based on, who the potential buyer is.
Sure. So I think that's very, very important, particularly given the I'll use an example that isn't even an ERA listing. So my wife and I were on vacation last year in Venice, and so we're doing the tourist thing. We're sitting on the gondola with our daughter and everything, and they had these canal front properties for sale, and I didn't even know what the listing company was, but it wasn't one that I recognized. And I thought it was really, really interesting that the sign that was right there on the water was in Italian, but then also in Chinese, which obviously shows you that, Chinese investors are obviously prevalent here in the U.S., but they are quite active even in Venice, Italy, which I never actually would have known anything about until I saw that sign. So you're exactly right. I mean, you need to target your marketing, your collateral, your signage, and everything to audiences that you think it's going to resonate with. And evidently on canal front property in the middle of Venice, there seems to be a fair amount of demand for Chinese signage. I thought that was neat. Yeah.
Yeah, that is neat. Talk to me a little bit about technology. I know you're really big pro in technology, and with your, your position at ERA, you're really, putting your foot on the pedal, on the throttle, so to speak, with technology. Without letting the cat out of the bag, what are some initiatives or things that you see aren't going away, and that agents need to get on board technology-wise?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people come to me and ask me, is technology going to make me obsolete as an agent? Because more and more of what I've historically done maybe is visible by consumers online. Obviously, the most classic example is viewing listings on Realtor.com or on Zillow. And I say to them, to be honest, when I was an agent, just pulling the listings together and showing them to my consumers was a very, very small portion of what I did. So I'm actually happy that consumers can go out there and look at properties, in the privacy of their own homes 24/7, so that they can come to me and say, I like this or that house. And as we all know as agents and brokers, how a house looks in pictures may or may not be how a house looks and feels in person.
Right.
And once they've even found the house, that's really when our work starts, right? It's then managing them through the escrow process, helping them through the negotiation, getting their offer accepted in this seller's market that we're in right now over the other folks, right? And deploying some of the nifty little tricks that you learn over time of making your offer letter seem very personal, submitting a picture with it, making it seem like you're the most likely deal to close, if not necessarily the highest offer. All those sorts of things that you really develop through years of practicing in this profession, that technology, doesn't replace any of. And then ultimately, it's that 8 to 10 years of what I call when you're not being paid, where we get calls as local area experts for being, do you have a dog walker, a nanny, a contractor, or whatever? And being responsive to your clients for all of those things, even when they're not actively buying or selling, they're just homeowners for that, 8 to 10 years. And so none of those things are going to be made obsolete by technology. Technology just becomes an enabler to all of those things. So for us, we view things in technology as a few ways. One, the consumer experience continues to improve. I personally have sold my soul to Amazon. Right, so I buy entirely too much stuff from Amazon, and it knows me uncomfortably well by now in terms of anticipating what I might be looking for, or, helping me see what I've just recently bought or what have you. And I think the consumer buying behavior or buying experience is going to become more and more similar to just whatever else the best of breed consumer shopping experience is, regardless of what you're buying, whether it's a Kindle on Amazon, or I'm not paid for by Amazon, by the way, or if it's buying a home or anything like that. So I think that's one thing. I think the consumer experience is going to benefit greatly from that. I think the broker and agent experience is going to benefit greatly too, and it's going to take a heap of money to be able to do that. The way I've equated is it's sort of like your Fitbit. Even if you know what your goals want to be, and even if you're actually quite expert at doing it, it helps keep you on track to know whether you're on or off track to hit your goals any minute of the day. And so that's sort of the direction that we're moving in at ERA, is leveraging the technology resources at Realty, where we spend over $200 million a year on technology, to be able to build out the technologies that there's no way I could possibly afford as an agent, or even as a very, very large brokerage. And I think in this day and age of competition, that becomes increasingly important, to be able to leverage the resources that a very, very large company like ERA and Realty can provide to you, because otherwise you end up being a lot less competitive in the marketplace if you don't have those tools readily available to you. So on the broker side, that's about agent recruitment and how to keep their businesses profitable and generating revenue from affiliated businesses like mortgage, title, and escrow. And for agent, it's how do we help you service your clients better, provide them with better listings, better pictures, follow up with them more quickly, keep you on track on a day-to-day basis, leverage your time as much as possible, engage your teams, all those sorts of things. Technology can go a long way in sort of maintaining the best practices that you might have as an agent and broker, but helping you handle it much, much more efficiently and on task.
Hey there, it's Michael LaFido. Thanks again for listening to our podcast. If you are interested in signing up for our Luxury Listing Specialist certification, or if you want additional information on how you can dominate selling higher-end homes in your marketplace, make sure you go to luxurylistingspecialist.com.
Man, you hit the nail on the head with that. So, a lot of times agents, especially, hate to be stereotypical here, but the older an agent, they get a little bit more stressed out about technology. I mean, with social media, different websites, that sort of thing. So what I hear you saying is technology can assist you, can make your life easier, but you still got to be, you got to still be game on with as far as knowledge, knowing market trends, knowing the area, knowing the ins and the outs of a property you represent. So, but the other part of it, and I believe Theodore Roosevelt once said, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know you care." You got to come from a consulting position, not a salesman's position. So you got to care about your clients. You got to know your clients, and technology can assist with the productivity, and so you're more efficient. But hopefully, technology never replaces the human element side of things.
No, it won't. It'll change a bit, obviously. If your claim to fame now is that you think you're the only way that a consumer can see a listing, that ship has probably already sailed for you, right? Yep. But if you embrace the technology and change over time with it and use the technology to help you be more productive in ways that you don't need to waste that time on anymore, then it really becomes a benefit to you. And everybody's got their own tipping point, obviously. There will be early adopters, there will be later adopters and everything, but, the Internet's not going away, right? And the next generation of what people are building out, even here at ERA, is pretty profound in terms of the impact that it can have for the betterment of our brokers and agents in our network. And that's exciting.
That is exciting. I wanted to circle back to something that you brought up, and
sure.
You had mentioned, in the market that we're in, and you had mentioned that you're in the seller's market. Talk to me a little bit about because I believe that in every market, at some price point, that the pendulum swings from a seller's market to a buyer's market, and that changes no matter what market you're in, and it's usually somewhere in that luxury space where the shift occurs from a seller's market to a buyer's market, and that's really what we pride ourselves on with our certification or our book, is giving agents more tools and resources and systems to help their listings stand above the competition, to get more eyeball traffic, which increase the likelihood of getting them sold. But overall, where are you seeing luxury trending? And again, it's all relative, right? Luxury is different in every part of the world. But overall, the top 10% in your languaging at ERA for distinct properties, how do you see the top 10 highest percentage of properties for given markets? Do you see it, trending more towards a seller's market or buyer's market in that top 10, those distinct properties price point?
Yeah, so that's a very insightful comment that you just made, right? Luxury properties are sort of at the edges, if you will, of a market, and therefore, because there's a smaller population of people, obviously, that can afford or be interested in those properties, and therefore, as the markets start to change or as the economy starts to slow down in that market, the luxury segment is the first to feel the impact of it, right? So not a big shock. And if you look across the U.S. right now, it's a great indication because New York, for example, is very different from L.A., is very, very different from Miami in terms of the market dynamics, even over the last year or so, and certainly where you would expect it to go over the next few years. I just saw a survey the other day that said that of a survey of like 50 economists, of which I am not one, nor do I profess to be one, 35 of them, 35 out of the 50, so 70% said that they're expecting a softening of the market, almost a heaven forbid recession to come about in somewhere in the neighborhood of 2020 or 2021. And that will really drive, if that does come to be, a further softening of the market, particularly on the luxury end. So let's say New York, for example, since I'm here now in New York, we've seen an increase in the number of transactions and the amount of total volume over the past year, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7% or so. But prices have gone down about 6%. Right? So it's starting to become more of a buyer's market. And there's actually a bunch of inventory in terms of new construction being built because they were building it in anticipation of the demand that has been in place over the last 3 to 5 years. And now as the market starts to soften, if you were a builder, you'd be getting a little antsy, because by the time you get these buildings done, is the demand going to be there that you were anticipating? So that's a good example. Los Angeles, they've been getting a lot of buzz around Silicon Beach. Los Angeles is where I was from. So an awful lot of activity in Santa Monica and Playa del Rey, those sorts of areas where there's an awful lot of new technology companies coming up. So much so that they're experiencing double-digit plus appreciation a year, and they've already started to see that calm down quite a bit, maybe almost by half over the past year or so. So the demand is starting to get caught up by the inventory, and the prices are coming down accordingly. Same thing in Miami. I mean, that market has actually started to slow down both in sales and prices over the last couple of years or so. Even while some markets that are outside of like Miami in particular, like Fort Lauderdale or something like that, are starting to pick up. So if you start to see that markets outside of the quote unquote prime areas are starting to pick up while the prime areas are going down, those are good indications that you're starting to reach a saturation point in that market.
Very good, very, very good information you shared. I appreciate that. That's something we always like to talk about. Get different perspectives on. Is luxury trending warmer, colder, buyer's market, seller's market, and so 35 out of the 70. Predict 2020, we're going to have a softening, if you will, kind of a bubble, if you will.
That's right, right. But, obviously there are external dynamics, right? So there's not just markets moving through their cycles, as is usual. You also have the new tax laws. So, for example, Trump's new property tax law that, is passing, sort of making its way across the country, has a pretty significant impact on areas like New York or California or what have you, because if your property tax withholding is capped, then suddenly you start looking at cheaper homes or moving to areas where it might be cheaper or where the taxes are balanced out. So, for example, there is a measurable exodus from New York and New Jersey for people to move down to Florida because Florida doesn't have, or Nevada because they don't have the income tax hit. So if you're going to, be able to withhold less on your property tax, then, you might have an inclination to try to make it up in other ways, and certainly a lower income tax would be one of them. So that is another dynamic that is sort of playing out in the U.S. market, and we're already starting to see some of that too.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's pros and cons to every tax law, right? And so, hopefully, one potential negative, which is the cap on the deduction of property taxes, hopefully the other benefits far outweigh it. But you're absolutely right. The principle of paying extra on taxes just doesn't sit well with most people. I mean, I was selling a property that was over $5 million, and the property taxes, part of the reason people are getting out of Illinois, the property taxes were $123,000, and just shortly after the new proposed tax law, this buyer had seen it 3 or 4 times, and the agent cited that as a reason he didn't want to pull the trigger. Now, mind you, the agent also shared with me that the gentleman had $50 million in an artwork collection. He was looking at putting an addition on this home just to showcase his artwork. So the gentleman's got $50 million in artwork, but the fact that he can only write off $10,000 of his $123,000 in property taxes was a sticking point. And so it's amazing. People have different reasons that they want to buy and different reasons they want to sell, but typically, taxes can affect negatively or positively. You mentioned some states there. Texas has got no state income tax, and Tennessee, the Nashville area. Those are 2 markets that are booming as well. Because they're very friendly with property taxes as well. Texas, not as much so as Tennessee. Tennessee, the taxes are very low and no state income tax. Texas, your property taxes are cheaper than Illinois, but that doesn't say much.
Right. But you raise a good point, right? For a luxury buyer, by and large, unlike somebody that, needs to get out of a average sales price home or lower than average sales price home because they've just been relocated by their company or what have you. So they need to buy, they need to sell, right? Luxury buyers, by and large, don't need to do anything. And therefore, if the dynamics or the metrics or the financials change for a given property or what have you, even though it's relatively small relative to the rest of their wealth or what have you, it could change the dynamic for whether they're interested in that property entirely. And that's one of the joys, but one of the tribulations of working within the luxury market is, your client can change their mind on a dime because they don't need to buy the property. Anything could change, and they'll just be like, I'm just going to put it on hold or whatever for a bit.
Yeah. Good point. Well, just a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate it. Tell me a little bit about if somebody wants to find out more about ERA, or perhaps they're a luxury agent, they want to find out more about the distinct properties. What's the best way for someone to do that?
Sure. So for ERA, feel free to log on to www.exploreera.com, so EXPLOREERA.com. And for distinctive properties in particular, feel free to log into www.eradistinctiveproperties.com. Both of those websites are a wealth of knowledge, and obviously if you fill out an inquiry form, we'd be happy to get in touch with you. Would love to have that conversation. I think one of my challenges as the new brand leader in the company is to, make ERA no longer sort of the best kept secret in the industry and show everybody the technology, the innovation, and this amazing network of collaborative brokers and agents that we have. So I would definitely enjoy hearing from any of your listeners.
Awesome. Well, you guys did a kind of a brand refresh several years ago, and you were kind of the first to do that, right? So before some of the other companies have, changed their look and their signage and that sort of thing and their logo, you guys did that a few years back, and I like the clean look that you have, and more importantly, love the direction you're going. So keep it up. So thank you for your time, Simon. Again, for the rest of us, if you want, as I mentioned before, to listen to a previous episode or you're not sure what other guests we've had on our episodes, you can find Luxury Listing Specialist on iTunes or Stitcher, or go directly to luxurylistingpodcast.com. Check out our book. Our book's on Amazon, Luxury Listing Specialist. It's got some amazing content. Or for more information on our actual certification, 14 modules, over 8 hours of content, go to luxurylistingspecialist.com. Whether you're a beginning agent or a seasoned veteran, there's some great knowledge, great content, great systems are shared on the Lux certification. Last but not least, text LUXE, L-U-X-E, to 72000 for 3 bonus items, including your Ultimate Listing Blueprint, video checklist, and a free three-part video series. My name is Michael LaFido. Again, send us an email if you have any questions, michael@marketingluxurygroup.com, michael@marketingluxurygroup. Remember, it's not the market, it's the marketing, and continue to prove others wrong. Have an awesome day, and remember to pull people up, more love, less hate. Take care.